neon,
Yep.
like mercury, cobalt, sulfuric acid, oxidants, polluted sea. Like
There's no
they've
people
turned
left, that kind of thing.
they've turned their environmental destruction into like a catchy song that they're all dancing to and celebrating, and like again dancing to it in like this psychedelic club setting where they are wearing like fish heads, and then at one point, as if like the sort of metaphor wasn't clear enough, these characters are like not taking this seriously. Literally, the acid goop hits that club at one point and literally starts like coming down the stairs, and all of the characters are like fleeing from it and screaming, and like the consequences of what they have done here have actually arrived in the form of like literal acid filth destroying the actual club itself.
Yeah. And
Which also just hits hard because we know at this point in the franchise too that what Honda was upset about was kind of the commercialization of the franchise. And
Right.
like, so like this feels like a movie that's in conversation with its own franchise pretty intelligently, that it knows that, hey, kids watch this. There's a kid in this film. He's playing with Godzilla toys. Like it's doing a sort of meta thing where it literally has like, what if like a kid who's a fan of Godzilla was in a Godzilla film?
Yeah.
And then it still teaches this kid a lesson, but it maintains that darkness, and it goes back to like Godzilla could teach a serious lesson about like, hey kids, you know, the environmental destruction, you should be paying attention to it. You should not be just ignoring it. Like the kids, for example, later in the film who respond with pure nihilism and just like go have a party on Mount Fuji where they're just like lighting grass on fire, which is not the response to environmental destruction hitting your door. Like they're like, hey, we don't have a club anymore, let's just go light some trees on fire. And you even have this brief shot of like what look like these ghostly figures like looking down at them being like, oh my God, what are these kids doing? You know, like that kind of thing. So it's interesting. Like it's totally built the sillier elements into it in a way that just deepens it, which is something that's really smart. Like again, like this Yoshimitsu Banno, like I would have loved to have seen him direct more stuff because he's very clearly thought through these images. He's very clearly thought through these ideas. And also, it's worth noting, this movie visually is just fucking crazy.
Yeah, it's wild.
Like,
is there any other Godzilla movie that goes into like the animated
Nope, I know
stuff?
what you're gonna ask.
Yeah,
nope.
Because I think that is so. It melds it all together. Like it gives that 60s aesthetic, but there's something about explaining the horrors in such a specific way, and in a way I guess that like kids would kind of latch onto at the same time, that really works well with it. Like for instance, one of my favorite shots is actually one of the animated parts where they don't show this whole time. They kind of, one of the big characteristics of Hedorah is the red eyes. And at a certain point, there's a cartoon where it shows the factory, but it has the red eyes, and it hasn't become Hedorah yet. So they're just connecting that kind of like that evil entity with the pollution and the physical factory and all of that. And I thought that was awesome. I really loved that.
I mean, like I was taking screenshots while watching it this time because I was watching it for the second time, and I was like, there were shots in here that I just couldn't believe that I was seeing. Like one in the early one, obviously the image of the mannequin drowning in the filth ocean covered in garbage, like, and the clock sitting there symbolizing obviously that they are running out of time to reverse these consequences. But then you get shots of like the introduction to Godzilla. It's almost like an Apocalypse Now sunset behind him as he's like marching his way in and like arriving and being like, because literally he is finally ascended to sort of like heroic force by happenstance, because they are like, he is naturally being called because there is a disruption with nature that he has sensed. And like like this is like who he should be as a character, I think.
For sure.
And you totally get that from this image of how huge he is, how he is coming with the power of the sun behind him, and he has sensed that there is something wrong going on here, where, you know, the little boy, his father is a Dr. Toru, and he studies fish, and he has brought this mutated tadpole, and he goes, this is not natural to the ocean, and all of the shrimp are gone that the shrimp fisherman was trying to catch. And now he's like, oh no, who knows how big that this thing could get. And yeah, all of the like smackdowns with Hedorah. I think he has 3.
Yeah,
in this
there
one?
seems like a lot, and they're long too. They're like they
they're
have
long.
They have a lot of steps to them, which I just absolutely loved. Like it wasn't, I enjoy watching Godzilla just kind of like slap guys around sumo style and all of that. But like they really honed in on the powers that they had and like how they're going to strategically use them. And we'll get to the end, like where Godzilla's using his fire breath to emit the electricity and all of that. But even with
which is awesome.
Yeah, it's sweet. But even with Hedorah, like the way that he strategically uses the slime, and at a certain point he's like burying Godzilla alive in a giant pit and covering him with the slime to like deteriorate him and try to suffocate him. Like it's
well, and Godzilla even just having to figure out, because he's like, look, this guy's a giant slime monster, and if I spin him around, he just goops acid everywhere. And at one point he actually punches through him, and he goes, oh, like this isn't like a physical form, like he's a pile of goop. Like what do I... And also, I think Hedorah, correct me if I'm wrong, he takes like 4 forms.
Yes, there's
because like,
one is like the small tadpole that kind of like comes together and creates the big one. Then I think the second one is the
flying one.
I think I thought that was the third one.
Maybe that's the third one.
I think the second one is the one that smokes the factory bomb and gets all powerful or whatever, and then he becomes,
which is great.
And also the